the silent arrival, the bustling station was alive with noise. Aliens from every corner of the galaxy filled the halls, their conversations a mix of languages and strange tones. Ships came and went, lights flickered, and the air was thick with the smell of food and metal. It was a place where no one paid much attention to anyone else. A place where everything was loud, chaotic, and fast. But today, something different was in the air. A girl stepped off the transport shuttle. She was small, delicate-looking, and wore a simple grey outfit that seemed out of place in this high-tech, wild world. Her hair, long and dark, hung round her face, hiding most of her features. She didn't move quickly, didn't try to rush or make herself known. Instead, she walked slowly, deliberately, as though the entire station was nothing more than a backdrop to her thoughts. Her presence was unusual, but it was her silence that made the biggest impression. The aliens around her glanced at her briefly, but they quickly turned their attention elsewhere. It was clear she didn't belong here. She was too quiet, too still. Her face held no emotion, and her eyes didn't move from the ground as she walked. She seemed lost in thought, perhaps unaware of the strange world around her. But the more the other beings looked at her, the more uncomfortable they began to feel. It wasn't because of her appearance, or even the way she carried herself. No, it was something deeper. Something about the way she moved so confidently through the crowded hall, despite her small size, made them uneasy. It was as if she had been here before, as though this place held no power over her. One of the bullies noticed her first. Tall and muscular, with sharp features and a long scar across his face. He was one of the station's toughest figures. He had seen many newcomers, many fragile beings who came from different worlds. They always tried to fit in, to make friends, to adapt to the chaos around them. But this girl, she didn't try to fit in. She didn't try at all. Look at her, he whispered to his friends. His voice was filled with mockery. She's just a child. Look at her, walking around like she owns the place. His friends chuckled, the sound harsh and loud. They could already see the opening for their usual game. They loved tormenting the weak, those who didn't understand the ways of this cruel, unforgiving station. As the girl passed by, they blocked her path. The tall alien stood in front of her, crossing his arms. His grin was full of teeth. "Where are you going, little girl? You look lost." The girl didn't answer. She didn't even look up. She kept walking, her pace slow and steady. The silence around her only made the moment more intense. "You're not going anywhere," the alien said, his voice becoming more threatening. His friends surrounded her now, their eyes shining with excitement. They were used to this kind of power, the power of making others feel small, helpless. The girl didn't flinch. She didn't look scared. She didn't even look interested. Another of the bullies stepped forward, taller than the first, and reached out to grab her arm. His fingers brushed against her sleeve, and, for a moment, the girl seemed to pause. It was so brief, so subtle, that no one noticed it except for the bullies themselves. Then, in a flash, the girl did something no one could have expected. She turned her head slightly, just enough to look at the one who had grabbed her. Her eyes were dark, full of an intensity that no one had seen before. They weren't angry, but they weren't passive either. They were the eyes of someone who had seen much more than they could understand, someone who was beyond the games these bullies played. The bully froze. For a moment, the others around him felt the shift in the air. The tension built, but still, the girl didn't speak. She didn't move. One of the other bullies stepped forward, attempting to break the silence. "What's wrong with you, Cat?" "God, your tongue," he sneered. The girl's lips parted for the first time since she had arrived. The sound that left her mouth was soft, barely a whisper, but it carried in the silence like a stone dropped into water. "I'm not here for your games," she said, her voice calm but firm. It wasn't what they expected. The bullies had heard threats before, but there was something different in her words. They were cold. They were certain. It was as if she was warning them, not because she feared them, but because they would regret crossing her path. The tension hung in the air, thick and heavy. The bullies didn't know what to do. They had expected her to break, to be scared, to beg for mercy. But she didn't. Her gaze moved away from them, and she took a slow step forward, leaving the bullies behind. They watched her, unsure whether to follow, unsure whether they should test her any further. The girl walked on, her steps echoing in the empty hall, each footfall a quiet promise that this wasn't over. She wasn't lost. She wasn't weak. She wasn't afraid. And the aliens watching her realized they had just witnessed something they hadn't expected. Someone who was so quiet, so still, that they had no idea what she was capable of. They would learn soon enough. The taunt the girl continued her silent march down the cold, metallic halls of the station. Her steps were measured, as if each one was placed deliberately. The dim lights above flickered now and then, casting long shadows on the walls, but she paid no attention to her surroundings. The noise of the station, the chatter of the aliens, and the bustling of the machines seemed to fade into the background. All she could focus on was moving forward. But the bullies were not so easily deterred. One of the aliens, a taller figure with a bulky frame and an arrogant smirk, decided that the silence from the girl was more than he could stand. He had tried to intimidate her before, but now, it seemed, the silence was mocking him. "Hey, little girl," he called out loudly, his voice booming through the hallway. "You think you're too good for us, too quiet to talk? Are you too scared to speak?" He stepped in front of her again, blocking her path. This time, his friends joined him, standing behind him like a pack of wolves ready to strike. They all wore smug, expectant expressions, waiting for her to break. They had seen this many times before, newcomers who thought they could remain silent, untouched. But no one was safe on this station. No one could survive without giving something up. The girl didn't slow her pace, nor did she change her expression. She simply looked ahead, as though she hadn't heard him. "You're not even going to answer?" The bully taunted, his voice dripping with ridicule. "What's the matter? You think you're too important to speak to us? Or maybe, ... you're just too scared?" The other aliens laughed, their voices harsh and mocking. Some of them even stepped closer, crowding around her in an attempt to make her feel small. But still, the girl remained unfazed. She didn't flinch, didn't twitch. It was as if she was somewhere else entirely, her mind detached from the cruel taunts being hurled at her. For a moment, the bully seemed to lose his patience. He grabbed her by the arm, his grip tight and unyielding. "I don't know who you think you are," he snarled, shaking her slightly. "But if you don't speak now, you'll regret it." The girl's arm didn't jerk away. She didn't try to break free. Her eyes stayed forward, her face still, but her presence had changed. There was a calmness in her demeanor, but also something more, something cold, like the calm before a storm. The bully's fingers dug into her sleeve, trying to force her attention. He leaned in closer, his face inches from hers, and he smirked, thinking that he had her trapped. "Come on," he said in a low growl. "Aren't you going to say anything? Maybe I should teach you a lesson." At that moment, The girl turned, her head slowly, her eyes locking onto his. The air seemed to grow colder, the noise around them fading into a thick silence. Her gaze was intense, unblinking, and it held the bully's stare with an unnerving calmness. For the first time since they had started, the bully felt something a shiver running down his spine. He tried to dismiss it, to laugh it off, but the unease wouldn't leave him. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was the feeling that something was about to happen, something that was beyond his control. Without a word, the girl released the fork she had been holding in her hand. It clinked on the floor, but the sound was lost in the silence that stretched between them. She shifted her stance ever so slightly, and in that moment, the bully thought he saw something flicker in her eyes, something sharp, like a predator. The alien's grip on her arm loosened for just a split second, but it was enough. The girl took one quick, smooth motion. Without warning, her hand shot out, locking round his wrist with terrifying precision. The force of her movement shocked him, making him freeze in place. The others watched, unsure of what to do, but the girl's gaze remained unbroken, focused, entirely on the bully before her. "I told you," she whispered, her voice still calm, but now laced with something dangerous. "I'm not here for your games." Before the bully could react, before he could even speak, the girl's hand twisted. The sudden movement was so fast, so expertly executed, that he barely had time to understand what was happening before pain exploded through his wrist. He screamed out, dropping to his knees in shock. The other aliens stood still, watching in disbelief as the girl remained in her seat, her expression unchanged. The tension in the room was now unbearable. The bully writhed on the floor, clutching his wrist, his eyes wide with pain and fear. The others around him looked from him to her, unsure whether to help or to run. For a moment, it seemed like everything had stopped. The station, the noise, the chaos, it all faded away. All that was left was the girl, sitting quietly, unshaken, and the bully, now lying helplessly at her feet. The girl's gaze never left him. There was no hint of satisfaction in her eyes, no smile, no pity. She simply watched him, as if waiting for him to understand something, waiting for him to realize that this was not a battle to win. And in that moment, it was clear to everyone present, the Deathworld girl wasn't a victim. She wasn't afraid of them, and no matter how hard they tried to push her, they would never control her. She was just getting started. The breaking point, the station's cold metal walls seemed to close in around the girl, and the lingering silence felt heavier than ever. The bully who had tried to break her remained on the ground, still clutching his wrist, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He was no longer the confident figure who had towered over her just moments ago. His pride, once unshakable, had crumbled, and in its place there was only fear. But the girl didn't even look at him now. She didn't care about his pain. She didn't need to. The others who had gathered around her were still frozen, unsure whether to intervene or retreat. They had seen many things on this station, but nothing like this. The girl had barely moved, barely spoken, and yet she had put one of their own on the ground with a single, calculated twist. It was not an act of anger, it was simply the cold precision of someone who had long since learned how to defend themselves. The silence stretched on, and the tension in the air was so thick it could almost be felt, like a physical weight pressing down on them. The girl's calmness only made it worse. It was as if she wasn't even aware of the effect she was having on everyone around her. But the leader of the bullies, a large alien with dark blue skin and a set of menacing claws, stepped forward. His eyes narrowed, and his voice, when it was low and steady. He wasn't scared, not yet. "You think you can come here, act like you own the place, and not pay the price," he said, his words cutting through the tension like a knife. The girl didn't react. She didn't flinch, didn't even acknowledge his presence. Her eyes were still fixed forward, focused on something far beyond the station, as though she was waiting for something more important than these petty threats. The leader's voice grew louder, more insistent. "I don't care where you come from. You don't get to disrespect me or anyone else on my station. You will speak, or you will pay the price." The girl remained still, her expression unchanged. She hadn't even moved a muscle, but the alien could see the shift in her posture. It wasn't a sign of submission. No, it was something much worse for him. A sign of quiet confidence, of someone who knew exactly what they were capable of. The bully on the floor tried to stand, his face contorted with pain. She snapped my wrist and didn't even stand up. He spat, his voice shaky, but the fear was clear. She's not normal. She's dangerous." The leader's gaze flicked back to the girl, his jaw clenched. He could feel the rising unease in his gut, but he refused to let it show. "You think this is over? You think because you hurt one of my men, you can just walk away?" he asked, a touch of uncertainty creeping into his voice. "No one leaves here without paying for what they've done." The girl finally moved. Her hand, still resting by her side, curled into a fist. She didn't make a dramatic gesture. She didn't need to. The power was in her stillness. Without looking at him, she slowly lifted her head, her dark eyes meeting the leader's with an unsettling calmness. The look she gave him wasn't filled with anger or defiance, it was simply a warning. She had enough. The leader's eyes flickered for a moment, something that might have been doubt creeping into his expression, but he didn't back down. He stepped closer, his claws raised, ready to strike. "Step back," he commanded his gang, but they hesitated, unsure of what would happen next. The scene was growing more intense with every passing second. The girl's voice finally broke the silence, and when she spoke, it was almost a whisper. "I don't want to fight, but if you force me, you'll regret it." Her words hung in, the air heavy with an authority that seemed to shake the leader to his core. For the first time since the confrontation began, his confidence wavered. He studied her face, trying to find a crack in her calm exterior, something he could exploit. But there was nothing. There was only cold determination. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice quieter now, almost respectful. But it wasn't a question he expected an answer to. It was a question born out of fear. He didn't know who this girl was, where she had come from, or what she was capable of, but he could feel it, her power, her control. "I am no one," she replied, her voice soft but final. "But you are about to understand that no one is. Someone you should mess with." The leader took a step back, his claws twitching at his sides. The girl wasn't just a quiet, helpless creature. She was something else, something dangerous. And in that moment, he realized that confronting her might be the biggest mistake he'd ever make. As the alien leader slowly backed off, the rest of his gang remained silent, their eyes never leaving the girl. The energy in the room had shifted. The atmosphere that had been filled with mocking laughter and threats now felt like a powder keg, quiet, tense, waiting to explode. The girl turned away from them, her movements fluid and purposeful. She didn't need to say anything more. She didn't need to fight. The bullies had learned their lesson, and in that silence, she had won. The leader stood frozen for a moment, watching her walk away. He felt his heart racing, the tension in his body refusing to ease. He had tried to control her, tried to break her, but all he had succeeded in doing was exposing his own weakness. He didn't know it yet, but this girl had already broken him. The snap of the station had grown quiet. The noise of the bustling marketplace, the sounds of ships coming and going, the chatter of aliens, all of it seemed to fade into the background. There was only the soft hum of the station's machinery, and the distant echoes of hurried footsteps as everyone moved about in a rush to forget the tension that had gripped the hall. The girl continued walking, her steps slow but steady. Her body seemed to glide effortlessly across the cold metal floor, her movements calm, deliberate. It was as if she hadn't just faced down an entire group of bullies moments ago. It was as if nothing had happened at all, but the silence she left behind was deafening. The leader of the bullies, who had been so confident just minutes before, now stood at the edge of the hall, staring at the retreating figure of the girl. His hands were clenched into fists, his jaw tight, but his mind raced. What had just happened? How had she done it? His gang was still standing where they had been left, frozen in place, their eyes wide with confusion and fear. No one spoke. No one dared to. The girl's cold calmness had shattered their understanding of power, leaving them uncertain and, for the first time, afraid. But that silence couldn't last forever. The leader finally turned to his gang, his voice low but full of authority. "She's nothing," he muttered, though the words felt hollow, like he was trying to convince himself. "Nothing but a quiet little girl with a trick. That's all she is." But his words didn't carry the weight they once had. They fell flat, like a broken promise. One of the other bullies, the one who had been on the ground, his wrists still throbbing with pain, spoke up. "She's not like the others. You saw it, didn't you?" She barely moved, and he, double quotes, he motioned to the leader's wrist. He barely touched her, but she snapped it like it was nothing. The leader shot him a look, his eyes narrowing. "Shut up, you're scared of her. She's just another weakling who got lucky." But even as he said it, a knot of doubt twisted in his stomach. There was something in the way the girl had moved, something in the cold precision of her actions, that made him uneasy. He couldn't shake the feeling that they had underestimated her, and he couldn't shake the thought that she had been playing with them. He pushed the thought aside, though. He wouldn't let fear get the best of him. He was in control. This station was his. The girl wasn't going to ruin that. He would make her regret it. But as the girl disappeared into the depths of the station, the doubt didn't go away. The girl had found a quiet spot in the station, a small, dimly lit corner, tucked behind a row of storage crates. She needed a moment to collect herself. Her heart was calm, her mind focused. She had no fear, no hesitation. But there was something else, something she couldn't quite place. She had been trained for this, for situations like this. Her quiet strength, her ability to remain calm in the face of hostility, was all a part of the plan. She had endured worse than what the bullies had thrown at her, but something about them had unsettled her. Maybe it was the sheer arrogance they displayed, the way they assumed they could push her around without consequence. Or maybe it was their overwhelming presence there. Had been so many of them. She couldn't let that happen again. Her fingers flexed at her side as she recalled the moment when she'd made the leader freeze, when she'd shown them her power. That was the moment that would define this encounter. And it had been easy. Too easy. But she wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Back in the main hall, the leader of the bullies was seething. His fists were tight, his anger rising. He couldn't let the girl walk away from this, not after what she had done. The humiliation was too much. He turned to his gang. "We're not done yet," he said, his voice a low growl. "Find her." Now, the others looked at each other, hesitant but fearful of the leader's anger. They knew better than to question him now. They'd seen him deal with problems before, and it was never pretty. Yeah, one of them muttered, stepping forward. "We'll show her who's in charge around here." But even as they walked away, the leader's thoughts were clouded with doubt. He knew they had to act quickly before the girl had a chance to strike first. But what if she didn't fight back? What if her power wasn't in fighting, but in the calmness that had unsettled them all? He shook his head, trying to clear his mind. This was just a game. He could play it better. They would find her, corner her, and force her to admit who was really in control. Then, maybe, he'd break her. But as he glanced at his gang, a strange feeling of uncertainty gnawed at him. He couldn't help but feel that this was more than just a game, and he wasn't sure he was prepared for the price that would come with playing it. As the gang split up to search for her, the girl sat quietly in her corner, waiting. She had anticipated this. She knew they wouldn't just let it go. They would come for her, just as they always did, trying to break her, to control her. But she wasn't like the others. She wasn't weak. She wasn't afraid. She had a plan. And when the time came, they would learn that sometimes the quietest ones are the most dangerous. The aftermath of search didn't take long. The girl was not hiding. She was waiting, patiently, knowing exactly what was coming. She had already seen it play out in her mind. They would come for her, believing they could intimidate her, force her to submit. But she had already shown them who she was, and now it was their turn to realize it. The station felt quieter now, almost too still. The air seemed to hold its breath. Even the most energetic aliens, usually bustling in the marketplace, or talking in loud alien tongues, seemed to sense the change. They were all watching, either unaware of the tension in the air or too afraid to speak. It was as if the girl's presence had shifted everything around her. No one dared to approach her now. They all watched from a distance, sensing the looming danger that she posed, but not knowing exactly what to expect. The first of the bullies found her, a smaller, faster alien, one who had been part of the group but had remained quiet during the earlier confrontation. Spotted her first. He approached, cautiously, almost as though he was testing the waters. He had seen her break one of his friends without lifting a finger, and he wasn't eager to repeat the experience. He stopped a few paces away from her, staring at her with wide eyes. "Hey," he said softly, his voice shaky. "Are you? You're gonna kill us all?" The girl didn't look at him. She didn't even acknowledge his presence. She simply sat there, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap, staring ahead as if the universe around her didn't matter. The bully swallowed, his fear rising. "We didn't mean to mess with you. We were just having fun," he continued, but his words were unconvincing, even to him. "We didn't know you were, different." The girl didn't reply. Her silence was enough. Her presence alone had more weight than any words he could speak. "Please," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Just let us go. We didn't want this to get out of hand. We were just playing, We weren't trying to hurt you." The girl finally turned her head. Her eyes met his, and in that moment, he felt as though she had stripped him of his last shred of confidence. There was no malice in her gaze. No anger, just ... nothing. A complete lack of interest. It was as if he wasn't even worth her attention. "You already hurt me," she said quietly, her voice still calm, almost detached. "But I'm not interested in your apology." The bully flinched, as though the words stung more than any physical blow. And they did. They were worse, much worse. The quiet, unfeeling way she spoke to him, her complete lack of fear or anger, it rattled him to his core. "I just want to go," he muttered, stepping back. "I'm sorry, I didn't know." The girl didn't respond. She simply returned, her gaze to the distance ahead of her, her hands still folded calmly in her lap. The bully hesitated for another moment, unsure whether he should leave or stay, but the atmosphere around him was thick with the weight of her presence. He could feel the power in the air, the silence pressing down on him. He didn't know what kind of power she held, but he was certain that crossing her was not a mistake he could afford to make again. With one last glance at her, he turned and walked away, his steps quick and uneven. He wasn't the only one watching. The leader of the bullies was nearby, hidden in the shadows, his eyes narrowing as he saw the exchange. His heart raced. He had seen enough to understand that the girl was no ordinary victim. She was calm, deadly, and in control. The exact opposite of everything he had imagined. And he didn't like it. He had thought he could break her, that he could force her into submission. But she had turned the tables with a single motion, a single word. Now he had to decide what to do next. If he let her walk away without consequence, his reputation would be shattered. If he continued to chase her, he risked exposing his own weakness. But he had never been one to back down. Not from anything he watched. The girl from his hiding place, his mind working furiously. He couldn't allow this to continue. Not like this. Not with the whole station watching, seeing her as something more than just a weak girl. No, this couldn't go on. The girl didn't notice the leader watching her. She didn't care. Her thoughts were elsewhere, focused on the moment ahead. She knew what he was planning. She could feel it, and when the time came, she would be ready. Meanwhile, the other bullies had been scattered across the station, unsure of what to do. Some had returned to their posts, while others lingered in the background, still haunted by what had happened earlier. No one spoke much now. The atmosphere on the station had shifted, and they all felt it. But it wasn't just the bullies who felt the tension. It was everyone. The quiet, unnoticed girl from Deathworld had become a shadow over the station, and nobody knew how it would end. The girl sat there, still and calm, but her mind was alive with thoughts. The bullies were only the beginning. The leader would come. For her again, that much was certain. But she had her own plans. And when the time came, she would be the one to dictate the terms of this conflict. For now, she waited, her calm presence a stark contrast to the storm brewing around her. But one thing was clear. No one was going to push her around anymore. The challenge, the calm that had followed the brief confrontation, was now replaced with an uneasy silence. The girl, who had once been an unnoticed figure in the crowded station, was now the center of attention. Whispers spread like wildfire, carried by those who had witnessed the strange, unsettling scene. Her name, or rather her reputation, began to take root in the minds of everyone on the station. She wasn't just another newcomer. She wasn't a helpless victim. No, she was something different, something dangerous. The leader of the bullies had retreated, but his pride burned like a fire in his chest. He was angry, yes, but more than that, he was humiliated. He couldn't just let it go. His men were watching him. The station was watching him. They all expected him to act, to restore his reputation. But what could he do? He had tried to break her. He had tried to push her, to control her. And yet, it was she who had left him powerless, broken. The girl's strength wasn't in her ability to fight, no. Her strength was in her mind, her cold, unflinching calm. And that, to the leader, was more terrifying than anything he had ever faced. As he paced back and forth in his private quarters, his claws clenching into fists, an idea began to form in his mind. A challenge. Yes, that was the only way to regain his honor. If he could defeat her, force her to back down in front of everyone, then maybe, just maybe, he could erase the shame. He had no doubt that he could take her down, if he could just get her to fight. And he knew how to make her fight. He called his gang together, the same ones who had been so sure of their strength earlier. They all gathered in the dimly lit room, their faces a mix of uncertainty and anticipation. They knew the stakes now. They knew what had happened when they tried to push the girl too far. The leader stood in front of them, his voice low but filled with authority. "She's not like anyone we've faced before," he said, his eyes hard. "She's different, and I'm going to make her show us who she really is." His gaze swept over his gang. "We need to challenge her. We need to push her to the point where she has no choice but to fight. Once we do that, we'll take her down, and this whole station will know who's in charge." One of the bullies, the one who had been on the ground earlier, stepped forward. His eyes were wide with fear, but there was a sense of respect in his voice. "Are you sure about this? She's not like the others. She doesn't react the way people do. What if she ... kills us?" The leader's eyes flashed with irritation. "She's not going to kill us," he snapped. "I know how to make her fight. We just have to find the right way to push her." He paused, looking at each of them in turn. "This will be our last chance to take her down. If we don't, she'll run this station, and no one will ever take us seriously again. Do you understand?" The gang murmured in agreement, their fear still evident, but their loyalty to their leader was stronger. They were in this together. If the leader said they could break her, they would follow his lead. The girl was alone in her corner again, her mind focused on the quiet hum of the station. She had expected the bullies to come for her again. She knew they wouldn't give up that easily. The leader's pride, his arrogance, wouldn't allow it. But she was ready. She had prepared for this. She hadn't come to the station to start a fight. She hadn't come to prove herself to anyone. But she understood one thing clearly now. Some people could never be made to see the truth until they were forced to, and if it meant standing up to them once more, showing them just how far she could go, then so be it. Her fingers brushed the edge of the table she sat at, the cool surface grounding her. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting her mind settle. Her calmness was a weapon they didn't understand, but it was time for them to understand. She wasn't afraid of them. The leader's plan was set in motion. The next day, he made his move. He found her, sitting as she always did, alone and calm, in the same corner of the station. He knew that this was the moment. This was where he would force her to reveal her true power. He approached slowly, flanked by two of his biggest allies, who were ready to back him up if things went wrong. But the leader didn't think things would go wrong. He had everything under control. He stopped just in front of her, his tall form casting a shadow over her. For a moment, he didn't speak. He simply watched her, waiting for her to acknowledge his presence, but she didn't. She didn't even flinch. Finally, he spoke, his voice cutting through the silence. "You think you've won, don't you?" he sneered. "You think you're better than us? That you can just walk in here, sit down, and we'll all bow to you?" The girl didn't answer. She didn't even look up at him. Her eyes remained fixed ahead, her posture relaxed. She was in complete control, and the leader could feel it, but he was determined to break her. He stepped closer, his face now just inches from hers. "Well, I've got news for you," he growled. "This is my station. I'm in charge here, and if you want to keep your life, you'll fight me. Right here, right now." There was a pause. A long, drawn-out moment where the air seemed to thicken. The girl's eyes slowly lifted, meeting his with that same cold, unfeeling gaze. The challenge had been issued, and now the fight was inevitable.